This week, I'm unpacking an email the Royal Kennel Club sent to breeders and owners about endorsements and why it's caused concern behind the scenes. It may sound technical, but it could influence what you see as a puppy buyer, especially around registration papers and breeding rights. I explain what endorsements are, why breeders use them, and why talk of automatic changes has made people uneasy. Welcome to the Bulldog Owners Podcast, where I host a passionate conversation about pedigree dogs. I'm Sarah, and here we cut through the myths and misinformation to talk honestly about life with bulldogs. We are on another walk and talk, and I thought it would be worth having a conversation about an email that the Royal Kennel Club has sent out in regards to endorsements. To explain what endorsements are, why people use them, why breeders use them, what the recent communication the Kennel Club have sent that got people in a bit of a panic, and how it feeds into the larger narrative that they have at the moment. I think I've already said about the bigger, wider changes that are happening in the dog breeding landscape and dog ownership and veterinary support and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot going on. And this has coincided. The Kennel Club have basically pulled the finger out the bum and realised that they've been behind in their communication for years, if not decades. Now they seem to be communicating a lot, like the pace of life is a lot faster, things turn around a lot quicker. They seem to be communicating more, and I'm sure no doubt it's because of the wonders of AI that can capture meeting minutes now, can get them summarised super quickly, sent out the door. From that, you can make press releases, blogs, all that kind of stuff. So the chairman, I don't know if he's pushed this narrative or it's just naturally happened that way, or they've employed the right people. They've realised there's a gap and they filled it. And so they've realised, we need to communicate a lot more, so people realise how involved we are in the world of dogs. And it's coincided with all these changes, not necessarily fueled by them, but most certainly is part of it. And I think because they've never communicated in this way before so frequently, it's actually unsettling for the people that have always worked alongside them, that have registered their dogs. They're just not used to so much communication and changes. And obviously change makes people uncomfortable. As humans, we're a total sucker to, this is what we've always done, this is what we always want to do, because that's what our brains are used to. It's comfortable. Why would you want it any other way? But obviously there's a lot of external pressures that there's going to be a lot changing. And I think it's just freaking people out a bit because they're A, not happy with all the changes, but B, that they're communicating on such a fast turnaround that they're just not used to. Now, I say this because the Kennel Club recently sent out an email in regards to endorsements. Now, if you don't know what endorsements are, I'm about to explain to you. When you register your litter with the Kennel Club, obviously you have to meet their code of ethics, which is about how you look after the dam and how you rid the litter. Quite like low level stuff, to be honest. Like make sure she's got water in her bed. You can't register pups from a female under a year old, over 8 years old, and like they have certain welfare points. Basically, the code of ethics is pretty much welfare. And then, like I said before, like you can't register mum and son breeding, and if you use a dog, you need to know their credentials to register litter. Pups have to be registered by the time they're a year old. Certain rules and regulations. When you register the pups, if you have a kennel name, which if people have just breeding 1 litter, maybe 2 litters, they might not have a kennel name, and they can use the Kennel Club's kennel name, which I think changes every 6 months, and it basically begins with Ken, and it'd be like Ken Quartz, Ken Mill, Ken all sorts, basically. So some people, when they're buying a puppy, get confused and think that that breeder has a kennel name. They don't. They're just using the Kennel Clubs the only reason to do that is just to make the kennel name look a bit nicer. Otherwise, anyone that basically wants to establish a reputation in their breed and wants to claim the dogs as theirs and their hard work, they will use a kennel name. And you have to apply for it. It has to not clash with stuff that already exists out there. And then you need to pay an annual fee to keep it in existence. So you register the pups, you decide if you haven't got one, whether you apply for one or whether you just register them without, or whether you just use the kennel clubs. And then if you have got one, whether you're using it or not. And you don't have to, even if you have one, whether you use it or not. And then you have to provide the names of what you want the puppies to be called or referred to as. And obviously, like, kennel names are always quite funny because really in its simplest form, it's a way for a kennel to market, promote their kennel. So some of them have themes, some of them go through letters of the alphabet, more in Europe than in England. Yeah, some of them just have really funny names, and they try and get away with, the staff at the Kennel Club will check the names to make sure they're not offensive. I'm sure they're not politically derived and all this kind of stuff. But sometimes the odd funny one gets through about the mother-in-law or so on. Anyway, you register your pups. You register the names, you have to give a backup names in case they're not all accepted. And there's also a service that the Kennel Club gives them names, which are generally absolutely shocking. I think they must just have found some online name generator, or it'd just be topical of what's happening at the time. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of Olympic ones and Queen Jubilee and that kind of stuff. So, which suits some breeds more than others. And obviously some breeds like Huskies and will have like Native American names, and Labradors have quite working driven names like Oak and Moose and all this kind of stuff. So, and then the Bulldogs tend to have old names or really human names. But you register your pups and then you have a choice whether you put endorsements on the puppy. You have two selections. One of them, you select X, which says this puppy will not be allowed to be issued with a export pedigree. Now, this doesn't mean you can't export the dog. It just means that you won't allow the new owners to have the pedigree to be registered with a foreign kennel club. So they can't show it, so it's not on their systems in that country. So then any puppies won't be able to be bred from, well, it would be able to be bred, but no puppies would be able to be registered. And then you have R, I don't know what it's R, but it's progeny are not eligible for registration. So this is where you're saying if this dog was bred from, none of the pups can be registered with the kennel club if they're still in the UK. Now, the reason breeders might tick this is they're just trying to control and protect their line. So they're basically saying, we don't want you taking my bloodline that I've possibly put decades into to go and do some shocking breeding, and then my reputation is tarnished because of what you sabotaged my kennel name with. So many breeders will do this. Breeders, just because they've been applied, doesn't mean they can't be lifted. Many breeders will agree that the endorsement will be lifted if the owner meets general criteria, which generally, if it's in regards to breeding, it will be that they follow the health testing for that breed, whether that be DNA panel, fits on elbows, health schemes, whatever, eye tests, heart tests, hearing, whatever it might be. Then you can apply for the Kennel Club with the evidence that you have, saying the breeder is happy to lift these endorsements. So it just helps with a little bit of control of the hard work that you've done. Now, interestingly, there's an ongoing sort of conversation about anything to do with dog breeding is pretty much a civil matter. Kennel Club try not to get involved with any disputes between parties. And with endorsements, the problem you have is if you sell the dog and that person knows there's an endorsement, if they then sell that dog on and a new person was unaware of any endorsements, the Kennel Club have been known to lift the endorsements. So they're not standing by their own structure. So to prevent this, at first they said make sure that you get your new owners to sign that they're aware endorsements exist on this dog. And then they said that you need to fill out another form as well. And I imagine the other form gets filled out, but probably not as half as much as the number of endorsements that are applied to puppies being registered. Now, I endorse everything in my litter, even the ones that I'm keeping, because I never know what the future holds. So everything gets endorsed, and if that dog passes its health testing, it's good to be bred from, then the endorsements get lifted. And I've gone to register litters before, and they're like, "Oh, the dog's endorsed." And oh yeah, forgot that was on. So I've lifted them on my own dogs and other people. I generally say to people, bulldogs are the most difficult dog to breed. Like, you are jumping in at the deep end if you've never bred before and you fancy breeding a bulldog. And I'm like, as long as you're aware of that, then that's fine. And as long as they do the health testing, and I basically say, as long as you health test to my standard or more, like, you could still be doing way more than what I do. You could still do hips and elbows. You could do hearing tests. You could do full on heart grading. You could do loads of stuff. There's loads of extra stuff that we don't do. So if you breed to my level or better, and you use a dog of equal merit or better, I assume better, that's why you're breeding, you should always breed better than what you have, then why would I not allow you to breed from your dog? So as I say, I endorse everything, but I'm happy to lift as long as the criteria is met. And like, sometimes that's worked in my favour as well, because I've lifted an endorsement and then I've gone, do you know what? That puppy's really nice for that list. I'm going to buy a puppy in. It is winner. I need to start saying winner, winner, chicken dinner. But in those instances, you're like, oh, that's excellent. Like, they've done what they wanted to do. There's actually really nice something in there for me to keep. Like, it works for everybody. Some breeders are a little bit sneaky, and they will try and manipulate the person in regards to lifting the endorsements. So they'll basically say, oh, I'll lift the endorsements, but you're going to have to pay me another £1,000 or whatever, or I'll only lift the endorsement if you use my stud dog, which I think is naughty. But if that's detailed in the puppy contract and you've signed that, then on your head be it. But I think that's a naughty level of control. But obviously, if you had a good relation with them, you'd probably listen to your breeder anyway. So it's a catch-22. Now, back in the day, there was a big discussion where some breeders said, show breeders, I'm not going to endorse any of my dogs, because if I wasn't happy with the person I was selling the puppy to, I wouldn't sell them the dog in the first place. Now, interestingly enough, those people that said that, their dogs feature in a lot non-recognised colour breedings. That's how far I got you. And I would be a little bit horrified back then. Slightly different now because of, say, the change of times. And actually, there would be an argument to be said that using a dog of non-recognised colour would improve the gene pool. And these people are going to breed their dog anyway. So let's not let them use a substandard or subferior dog. Let them use the best that's possible, which would be traditional colour, breed standard, show type dog. But then there's reputation and peer pressure and all sorts that come along with that. So it doesn't happen most of the time. But there were people that went and purchased a good pedigree and they crossed it straight away with non-recognised colour, because what you'll typically see is the dogs of the fad colours, fancy colours, they lack breed type, because the main focus for those breeders was just the coat colour. It wasn't actually about the health, and it wasn't about the type of dog. So then obviously, if you were a bit clued up with what you're doing, you go and get a fancy colour, get the coat, and then you'd actually put it to a dog of correct conformation and structure and health, and try and get the best of both worlds. So that's what some people did, and then that's muddied the water. And believe it or not, I'm not actually as preachy as some people in the show world in regards to non-recognised colours. I don't have a scarcity mindset. So I just believe that whatever lane you're in, stay in it. If non-recognised colours are your bag and you feel that you're breeding the healthiest possible dogs possible, and that you can find the best puppy owners and you're doing a good job, then crack on, because on your deathbed, when your life flashes before you, that will either be a key moment or it won't be. I'm not anti whatever. I'm just crack on and get on with whatever you're doing. It makes no difference to what I'm doing, which is breed standard colours, good health, good type, good temperament, and finding like 5-star puppy owners that actually understand the quality and value of puppy or dog that they're getting. Yeah, so there was breeders that basically didn't endorse, and then that sort of muddied the waters to a degree. So that actually makes life a little bit more challenging now, because people didn't stay in their lane. Unless you become like a detective on my KC, which is the Kennel Club's archive, you would have to track back however many generations to see whether there's a non-recognised colour. My kind of argument would be now, as long as, even if the mum come from heritage that's non-recognised, as long as in her litter there was as long as she's a standard colour, but hopefully the whole litter, then green light, it is what it is. Like, it'd be ridiculous otherwise. Sub-quality dogs are being green lighted to be bred from, and that shouldn't be the case. And this is where the snobbery, when it comes with show kennels, this is where the snobbery is, and it's just because they work so hard to protect and develop their bloodline. They just don't want to give it away for someone to totally abuse it and then become one of the statistics of unhealthy dogs. Now, the Kennel Club have freaked everyone out because they recently sent an email around, so they're communicating better and they're obviously trying to gather insight and information. But the problem is, because we're not used to it, people are getting freaked out by it. They literally sent an email saying, we just want to do a survey about endorsements, and they've sowed the seed that they would possibly consider automatically lifting endorsements if the owners have met the health requirements that they're asking for. Now, I've already mentioned to you that what the Kennel Club asked for is different to what the Bulldog Breed Council scheme is, because the Bulldog Breed Council's health testing scheme is more about what are the problems in our breed and monitoring and assessing those in the least invasive way possible, where the Kennel Club would just be, we think all dogs need this. So for Bulldogs, they will have hips and elbows on there. It's a scoring system, and Bulldogs would be just really highly scored. I think you have to be careful with the Kennel Club because, and it's a bit of the situation we're in, if you jump through all their hoops, they're basically going to give you enough rope to hang yourself. And so if we were to all start hip and elbow testing, they wouldn't turn around and go, well done guys, we've got an idea, a number, what can we do to improve it? They would probably most likely go, or give the ammunition to people like the IHA and go, oh my God, these numbers are absolutely shocking. You shouldn't breed from anything that's not this number, which would be like a tiny percentage of bulldogs. So it's a hard line to walk, and this is what happened with the BOAS. So the brachycephalic obstruction airway syndrome is that they talked us into voluntary testing, which is fine. And then they said, right, you should only be breeding this to this. Okay, yeah, that's fine, like voluntary. But then when it's come to crafts, they've gone, we've got vet checks anyway. So we're deemed a high risk category 3 breed anyway, where any dog that wins best of breed at a general champ show, so a champ show that has all breeds attend, where you go and compete against all the other dogs that are utility to win best utility, and then hopefully to go and challenge for best in show, we already have to pass a vet check. And then for crafts, they said, oh, we're only going to let grade 2 or below health BOAS tested dogs enter. And then they've already changed within a year, they changed that to 1 and below. So, it'll be 0 soon. But as I've always preached on, the show community is a ridiculously small community. So the hoops for them just get smaller and smaller. Yet in reality, that's having no impact on the wider population of the breed. So it's just ridiculous. To me, you're scapegoating the people that are making the most effort. I'm all for health testing, but when it's in the control of the breeders and the people that understand the breed and live with the breed, not the people that just hold a registration system and need to be politically correct for their own profit line. So I say all of this, she needs to start summarising, that the Kennel Club sent the email out just surveying what people thought and floating the idea of automatically lifting endorsements, which is massively concerning to people that have used them to protect their lineage, their heritage, their reputation. And so it's all gone into a spin again. Now, my argument is, and I think I literally said on a Facebook post, that show people very much have like this Stockholm syndrome. They think that the Kennel Club is there to support them and back them, but they're not. They're a company. They need to make profit. They're actually a monopoly in their domain. There's very little alternatives that you can go to, and they're juggling the politics of animal welfare and being £15 million in loss for 2024. So they've got a lot on their plate, and they're not acting in breeders' best interest. And people are just beginning to realise that. I'm not saying they're not acting in pedigree dogs' interest, because they could well be, but it's definitely not in breeders' best interest. So I float the idea. In reality, you don't have to register with the Kennel Club. Like, if you don't think they're going to stand by your principles of how you breed your dogs, then realistically, the only way you can counter that is you just don't register your dogs with them. You can show puppy owners all the lineage. You can explain the conversation. They can even listen to this podcast. You can show them the podcast and say, look, this is why I'm not registering your puppy with the Kennel Club, or this is why the puppy goes with no papers, even though it's fully pedigree, purebred bulldog, because they are not backing what I'm doing. So it's an idea I've floated with, that's for sure. And some breeders have always done it, but the majority don't. But it wouldn't surprise me, and this is why I tell you, as puppy seekers that might be listening, this is why you might see potentially in the future top tier dogs, top tier puppies being sold with no pedigree papers. Realistically, to a puppy owner, it makes very little difference. When any breeder registers the pups, they always go into their MyKC account first, and then when the pups get transferred, they disappear out. Majority of breeders will still have tens of puppies, groups of puppies in their MyKey account because they haven't been transferred. So that's how much realistically the puppy owner values it, is that they just want to know that it's a legit puppy. They're not particularly obsessed that it's Kennel Club registered. So this is why I say the conversation you have with your breeder, the longer it goes, the better, because the more that the piece of paper is less important and it's more about the breeder and the dog. That might be a pattern that you might see going forward. And then there's an argument to be had, like the Bulldog Breed Council exists. Why can't they hold their own registration system? I mean, I'm sure they won't, because the admin involved in that, they're probably thinking, do behave. We're a bunch of volunteers. We've got enough on our plate. But there's a question to be had. Like I said, the Kennel Club are the monopoly leaders, so we don't have to use them. Why can't we just lift everything off of their database? And sure, under like Freedom of Rights Act or something or other, you must be able to get some of their database of all the pedigree dogs registered. Surely, like open source, that's what I'm trying to get at. Surely you'll be able to have access from that. Or even if you didn't, just start registering everything for now, the heritage going forward, and just like have the own, what could we call it, the BKC, Bulldog Kennel Club, and just we have our own system, our own certificates, and we get on with looking after our dogs and breeding our dogs how we want to. So there's definitely a question to be considered for that. So anyway, I hope that this episode helps you understand the turmoil breeders are currently experiencing, but also how that might impact you and what you see available to you. Because obviously, if there was top tier pups being sold with no Kennel Club registration, that could look quite confusing to you to know, how do I know that that's just not a dodgy puppy being sold with no papers? Or how do I know that this is a breeder that is protecting their reputation so much that this is the approach that they've been forced to take? And so hence why this episode exists, for you to be able to understand those nuances and understand those differences, and hopefully be able to define those different types of breeders. And I know I always bang on about it, but just being able to question your breeder and for them to be able to articulate what they're doing in a clear and concise way that sounds justifiable and genuine and doesn't sound crazy. Like maybe before you listen to this podcast, if you saw a top tier pup being sold with no papers, you might think, hey, why are they doing that? That looks dodgy, that looks scammy, that looks fishy. And it could be, or it might be totally genuine. And that's when you're going to have to put in a little bit of brain power and work out what is the case. But that's it. I think I've explained my point on endorsements and how they could be changing. As I say, they were just sense checking. They literally have just sent out a survey. So this is a bit of communication, and they're doing the right thing. Like, they're asking. We've moaned before that they never ask. The Kennel Club never ask. They just preach at us. But the problem is when they do ask, everyone gets really panicky. So I don't know. I don't know whether maybe they should have better forums or I don't know, focus groups or something, and maybe they should float that rather than sending out mass surveys to people, totally freaking out a large majority of basically their customers, because after all, they are a service driven business. So really their job is to please their clients and customers, which at the moment they don't necessarily seem to be doing a great job at. So anyway, that's it. I'm back home. We've done the walks, we've done the talks. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll catch up with you soon. Bye. Before you go, head over to bulldogownersclub.com if you fancy a bit of support with your dog, help finding a puppy, or joining one of our fortnightly informal chatty community calls.